Welcome back to Center Technology's educational series we're doing this week. Every day, we're picking a different common tool and we're dissecting it a bit to make sure we're getting the very most value out of that product. Yesterday, we talked a lot about Sharepoint. Tamara joined us and she's joining us again today. Tamara, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Appreciate you having Taylor Uden's name there again, just so we can keep the tradition going strong. So I know yesterday I even received some emails from some of y'all who joined, thanking Taylor for all the SharePoint knowledge. So Tamara, good or bad, they're going to blame Taylor for it, just so you know. The day before, we took a strong look into Teams, and the day before that, we looked at Outlook. All these recorded sessions are going to be available to you to rewatch or to share with someone else in your company if you think that the content would be good for them. Today, though, is PowerPoint. Maybe the most common concept we hear about is PowerPoint to death. So today, we're delivering a PowerPoint to death presentation on PowerPoint about the product PowerPoint. So Tamara, I know you had a really structured view of how you wanted to take us through SharePoint. I think the PowerPoint one might be even orchestrated even more clearly. So I'm excited about how we're going to go through this. Do you want to just jump right in?
Sure. So hi,
Excellent.
everyone. Today we'll be covering some tips for not only improving presentation experience, but also using PowerPoint as a training tool. So first off, I want to share some quick pro tips for upping your presentation game by making your slides more impactful. So a common reason many dread giving or receiving PowerPoint presentations is the amount of overwhelming text on the slides. Remove unnecessary words that aren't needed to get your point across. Only include words that are absolutely what you want your audience to remember. Leave the rest in the speaker notes and communicate details verbally. A simple headline visual helps with your message to be more impactful and more memorable.
Yeah, so Tamara, that was awesome with the examples there with less words. Your PowerPoint notes are different than anyone else I've ever met. Yours go through all the way through the sequencing of when to click for something to transition in. Is there such thing as too much notes?
There can be. So everyone has a different presentation style. Some people need more cues than others.
Right.
Some people naturally know how they want to build their message in their presentation, so they may not. Executives, I find it helpful, just if it's an executive level sort of presentation, especially since those can oftentimes be number or text heavy.
That makes sense. Okay.
So another tip. Resist the urge to spell out all the granular details on a slide. So Microsoft 365 actually includes a free library of icons and stock imagery within PowerPoint as well as Word. Using icons is a very simple way to provide context and reinforce core concepts without having your audience read through a ton of text. So how do you do that? It's in the Insert menu. There you go, Insert, then you click on Icons, and there's even a search function with various categories for most needs. So the nice thing with that is that then once you input them, then you can easily change the color of the icons by selecting the icons and changing the fill color. And the combination of simple images and accent colors oftentimes put more emphasis on what's actually important.
So in that version of that icon, what was the transition from? Give me an example of what would be the replacement that icon was using for you.
So that icon would have replaced things like all of these bulleted information.
Yeah.
So for instance, you know, if the core sort of takeaway or concept is keep it simple or concise, you know, it's putting together 3 things or something like that. It gives a visual context without actually having to spell out and define what each of those things are from a granular level.
Sure, and so that's actually a good tip, that there's probably more icons than I would think of. You use that I, but you can just search any keyword of what you're trying to convey, the theme of your message, and see if there's anything that's relevant.
Yeah, and the categories too, super helpful.
Nice.
Anything you want? I have a little saying.
You have a what?
A little saying.
Okay.
Keep it simple, smarty.
Oh, smarty. Nice. Yeah.
So in this particular webinar, we did want to talk about, embedding table data. So a lot of things that come day to day is where you may see table data that's copied from an Excel spreadsheet. Well, you can actually embed that, and you can embed actually some of the functionality from charts to other things to where then you only have to type it in once, and it's automatically in those other things. Other places. So at Center, we also use PowerPoint as a training tool. So oftentimes that would have been a custom HTML or a custom application or something like that. The problem was if you had to kind of keep that evergreen and ever growing and changing, you had to contact a developer or someone who knew the code. Here at Center, we try to leverage PowerPoint and to the maximum whenever possible. So that includes some of our training tools. And then, of course, publishing on Sharepoint. So we covered that actually yesterday,
Right.
but anything that you do here will be actually visible when embedding that and publishing that on Sharepoint sites.
Right. So for the audience, it might not make a ton of sense why we're going to touch that again, but in reality, you're about to show us some of the stuff that we do make live on SharePoint. And so that's going to be an awesome transition. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no, and templates too. So for instance, what we're showing here is a financial recap that our account executives use for executive business reviews with our customers. So typically each one of these boxes on its own would have been its own text box, its own chart. You'd have to double click into each one to update the data, and none of that data was actually connected. So, but if you're using an actually embedded Excel spreadsheet, you can have interconnected data points and you don't have to literally drill into each one. You could just update a couple of figures and all of those charts that are relying and calculating that data automatically update instead of having to go into each and every single one.
Wow.
So I just want to show you guys what that kind of looks like. So here is our embedded table or embedded XLS spreadsheet. And if you double click, you'll notice that instead of it being a typical sort of load thing, you're actually having a frame within a frame that's driven by Excel. So this is where 365, all the apps are intertwined. They're made to be more connected, and that goes from SharePoint to Teams all the way across. So here we had one worksheet that is just for the charts and calculated data, and then we have a data, and then we have other things. But whenever you double click in, you can update the data and then click back on the worksheet you actually want to show, and then you can click out, and there you go.
Yeah, that's impressive. I know for me, I build everything out in Excel, and then I sit down at a PowerPoint slide and I start to insert a table. And I can't tell you how many times I hit tab to add more rows or add more columns, and I've got too many, and deleting them is impossible. So what a quick way to just take my work that I've been doing for the presentation and move it right in, as if now the client's kind of looking at the presentation as if I was at my screen showing them. It's much easier.
Yeah, much easier. And again, that interconnect the data instead of each individual text sort of box. So how you do it, really super simple. So you would click in whatever your text box is or your layout box is, and then you would go to Insert up here on the top left, and you go all the way to where it says Object. So you get a nice little dialog box of all different types of things that can be embedded. Just note that you want to keep it to embedding files that other people actually have the application to support. Otherwise, it won't work. So you could do an XLS chart. You could do a worksheet, which is actually what you could do, and then also a macro enabled worksheet. Just note that if the macros are disabled, then your data, obviously that's embedded into the presentation, won't show up accurately or create a pop-up. And then you would hit OK. So then what happens is then you have a frame within a frame, just like how we saw in the example before. And then you can create all your various rows, columns. And then if I can actually out and then double click, might have to zoom out to see. But you'll see that the user interface. So you have sheet one, you can add additional sheets, all that good stuff, including charts and calculations and functions and all that.
In that case, once you're at this stage, would you do the rest of your editing here, or would you still be working with an Excel document on a separate screen or a separate area?
So yeah, so you actually do have an option of it not being embedded in the PowerPoint, but actually linking to an outside PowerPoint. So that's an option that you can look into. Just again, you have to make sure that the embedded Excel file is also permissions open for the person who would then also be using this presentation.
Makes sense.
All right. So again, as I mentioned, we use PowerPoint for a lot of our internal training tools. And so how to make it a training tool. So here at Center, we have our technology stack that we coin C-Stack. And this is actually a little taste of what that training tool looks like. So we are able to make it to where they can't go anywhere without clicking the I understand for the confidentiality. We can have these be buttons and give them a key and force them to hit, got it. And then from there, we have a fully immersive and interactive platform to where employees can go in and drill into each one of our partners. So for the purposes of this, they can go into Microsoft and go, oh, okay, these are all the different categories that they fit into in terms of our technology stack. They can go and look at our product focus or solution focus. They can see all the different compliance or differentiators from proven, tailored, and simplified. And then they can close out of that. They can also look at all of our center solutions and see how that relates in our bigger ecosystem. They can then go dive into a specific solution for additional information, whether it's our VDI or 365, anything that's related.
On that slide specifically, you've got links that then take you to the internet in some cases, our CenterNet, our SharePoint site in other cases. It's really whatever as a business you choose that you want to publish to the team to learn or to grow. One of my favorite features is the little yellow icon top right. You've added those per department essentially. So technical has a track and sales has a track. And so if you're a new hire and you're trying to learn how Center operates and the ecosystem behind it, you can get lost in here but stay on the relevant stuff for your department. Really, really neat.
Correct. We find it really helpful for the onboarding employees. Okay, so how did we do that, right? So we're going to get out of that. We're going to go over here. And how we do that is by transparent boxes. So if you're on a PC, those are links. If you're on a Mac, there is a difference between links and action settings. At one point, they were all action settings, but I think they've rolled that up to links now. And so you can create a box, any color, shape. You can move the transparency all the way to nothing. So let's go ahead and say that. And you can keep the outline. It's helpful for a moment. And then you just right click on it, link, and it'll bring you up a dialog box and place in this document. And then it gives you even a nice little preview of whichever of all of your slides that you can choose from. And then you hit OK and OK. And so again, I'm going to keep that line just so that we can see it. And if you go to presentation mode, now when I click on that, it will go to that slide. And so what you'll see is that on all of these sorts of training documents, there are tons of little buttons all over the place. And so some of these decks can range up to 70 something slides. But the nice thing is that then you have a real training tool that can be upkeep internally, and you don't need coding or anything fancy like that. And it can be embedded very easily in the SharePoint sites.
Nice. That looks like a maze in itself. Who created that diagram?
So a lot of our solution architects here at Center. So it's been developed.
Created that document. So
no, I did not. No, this is pre-existing. So, but it's ever changing. So as new technology and different categories and new ways, especially security. So if you were to have seen our C-Stack just from 5 years ago when I joined Center, there was probably half the amount of red with the little locks on it. And since then, new categories keep coming up because as new technology comes out, the new gaps surface in terms of security. So for instance, one that we just added was application, data storage, and privilege elevation controls. And so these are features that now our secure managed services customers benefit from automatically as a secure managed services customer, where otherwise that may not be in a technology stack that's on their radar.
Yeah, well, every business I think looks at themselves and says we do a lot. We have a lot of SKUs or we have a lot of service offerings. This is the only concise way I can think of that someone could sit down and see what does the center do. I mean, there's 1,000 things here, but we do 1,000 things, and so we found a way to get it all in one area. If you had asked me before, Tamara, you and I had met, I would tell you that that'd be impossible to show in a PowerPoint. And if you found a way to show it in a PowerPoint, it'd be so boring. But in reality, what this has created is a way that it changed the way our employees speak to each other. It changed our culture a bit and how we look inward before we go outward to bother people for questions. And it's really streamlined things. Between this and our SharePoint adoption, I think centers grown or matured quite a bit.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. The really cool thing, again, about using PowerPoint for these sorts of things is that you can empower your entire organization to be more interactive with what's happening within your organization. They can, you can store this file as a working file on SharePoint. You can provide them permissions to edit it. They can update it themselves, use the templates, and then publish it once it's approved. And you don't have to have someone who's super specialized in it. I mean, frankly, my 13-year-old does. It just takes a couple of getting used to.
This is a great example of one of the many documents within Center that James is not allowed to edit. So thank you for not giving. It should be. If I have permission to edit that one, we're in trouble. So you did a great job of showing us some tips, some pro tips. We then got into embedding. That was one of the coolest features that you can see in a whole Excel editing file inside a PowerPoint slide. And now we've looked at how to use layers of slides as links, essentially, to make it interactive. Any other fun tips that come to mind that are just some of your favorite things about PowerPoint? Anything you learned lately where you thought, I didn't even know the tool did that? You're a Mac user. Are there reasons that a Mac user would love PowerPoint more than a PC user?
Okay, so one thing that from a scalability, since I am in technically, I guess, the marketing department, is that you can leverage PowerPoint for very quickly doing animated GIFs. So there's a lot of freeware and that sort of thing, or really expensive ware from a graphic standpoint to create animated GIFs, but then it's siloed in its own thing. So as a organization who is out there presenting new solutions and the value add of those solutions, we are constantly having different presentations, illustrating our value add. Well, with PowerPoint, we can do two with one bird, or two birds with one stone. So we can animate it in the PowerPoint for a really, provoking and engaging presentation, but then we can export that out as an animated GIF for social posts, for embedded website stuff, for any of those items.
Yeah, so that's hilarious. I would have never thought of that as a use case either, but now I'm thinking of storyboard stuff that I've seen you do in PowerPoint, and you do that. I don't even think that's hilarious. I didn't even think about how you do that. Just that I see it happen.
I mean, it's not as cool as more expensive stuff, but it gets the job done, and it's editable and accessible by our whole organization. And that's really cool.
Sure. Well, Tamara, you're a genius when it comes to this stuff. I still can't wrap my head around how long it took to teach yourself a lot of these things. But I love how you use the technology to its fullest extent. It really screams the goals Chris Pace has when he founded Center, that he wanted to make sure that everything we sold, that our customers received full feature functionality. So I love that component to it. We were going to do a little bit on that publishing the SharePoint, but we already did it yesterday, so we're going to see that back on the old videos if anyone wants to take a look at them. Does anyone else have any questions for Tamara? Awesome. Well, Tamara, thank you again for all your help with getting through yesterday and today's educational webinars. We're going to use the feedback from our customers. If there are any other topics, Excel or other tools that you might want to see a 30-minute training on, please give us that feedback so we can continue to grow the educational webinar series. Until then, we'll see you next time, and be safe.